You think you are free. You think no one controls you. But if you pause for just a moment, you'll feel the strings. Subtle, invisible, pulling at your emotions, steering your choices. That smile you gave when you didn't want to, that apology you made when you weren't wrong, that hesitation before speaking your mind. These are not random moments. They are fingerprints of manipulation. Most people never notice them. They walk through life like puppets, believing they are the masters of their fate. But the truth is darker. Someone is always watching, always guiding, always bending your will without force. The question is not if you are being controlled. The question is, how much? And once you see it, will you be strong enough to cut the strings, or will you remain a beautifully broken puppet? Power doesn't always announce itself with chains or commands. The most dangerous form of control is quiet, delicate, and nearly invisible. It doesn't force you to obey. It makes you want to. Manipulation is built on threads too fine for the eye, yet strong enough to hold the heaviest soul. These threads are spun from emotions: guilt, silence, flattery, and obligation. Each one alone feels harmless. Together, they form a web you cannot see until you're struggling inside it. Think of guilt. A simple phrase like, "After everything I've done for you," wraps around your conscience like wire. You move not because you want to, but because you don't want to feel the sting of being ungrateful. The manipulator smiles, knowing they have pulled you closer to the center of their web without ever raising their voice. Then comes silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy silence designed to suffocate. They withdraw their words, their warmth, their presence. You feel the emptiness and rush to fill it, with apologies, concessions, compromises. They didn't force you. You forced yourself. The web tightens. Flattery, too, is a thread. Feels soft, but it binds just as firmly. When someone praises you in excess, it isn't always admiration. It's a leash carefully tied around your ego. The moment you crave more of it, they own a piece of you. Your need for validation becomes their currency of power. And obligation, the heaviest thread of all. The favors you didn't ask for, the gifts that carry silent weight. The "I did this for you, now you owe me." These debts don't live on paper. They live in your chest, making you feel small if you dare to resist. The victim in this web feels confusion. They cannot point to a single act of cruelty, yet they feel drained, diminished, trapped. They question themselves. Am I overreacting? Am I the problem? Their thoughts tangle until escape feels impossible. The manipulator, however, lives in clarity. They see the threads because they wove them. They know exactly which silence to use, which compliment to deliver, which favor to accidentally give. To them, it is not chaos, it is craft. And that is the brutal truth. Control does not require violence. It requires patience, subtlety, and the wisdom to let the victim tighten their own cage. The invisible web is not made of force, but of whispers. And the first step to breaking free is to notice the strands brushing against your skin. The guilt you didn't earn, the silence that feels like punishment, the flattery that leaves you craving, the debts you never agreed to owe. Once you see the web, it can no longer hold you. But until then, you are not free. You are only dancing gently, beautifully, in someone else's design. Control rarely arrives as a command. It arrives as a story so comforting that you accept it without question. The most effective chains are not made of steel, but of beliefs you were taught to cherish. You've heard them since childhood. Nice guys win in the end. Honesty always builds trust. Forgive and forget. It's the right thing to do. These phrases sound noble, almost sacred. They soothe your conscience and promise safety. But look closer and you'll see the trap. The lie of nice guys win. Society whispers that if you are endlessly kind, if you never push back, if you put others first, you will be rewarded. But manipulators love this lie. Why? Because it turns you into a servant who never questions exploitation. You give, they take. You yield, they advance. And while you're waiting for the universe to reward your goodness, they are already cashing in on your silence. The lie of honesty builds trust. You were told that speaking the truth will earn you respect. But manipulators weaponize your honesty. Every secret you confess becomes ammunition. Every weakness you reveal becomes a lever. You believe truth makes you safe. In reality, it makes you predictable. They smile, nod, and store your words like knives for later use. The lie of forgive and forget. It sounds enlightened, doesn't it? Forgiveness cleanses the soul, but forgetting is surrender. It tells abusers that there are no consequences. Manipulators thrive on your quick forgiveness because it guarantees they can hurt you again and again without fear of repercussion. Your mercy becomes their license. Do you see the pattern? These cultural scripts are not evil in themselves. They are twisted into weapons. They disarm you before you even realize there is a battle. You cling to them because they feel safe, while the manipulator sharpens them into blades. The victim lives in comforted illusion. They tell themselves, if I just stay good, if I just stay honest, if I just forgive, everything will work out. They sink deeper into passivity, believing virtue is armor. But it is not armor. It is bait. The manipulator, meanwhile, lives in brutal truth. They know the game is not about goodness but leverage, not about honesty but advantage, not about forgiveness but repetition. They feed you lies that keep you docile, while they move without restraint. And this is the harsh awakening. The world does not reward the nicest, the most honest, or the most forgiving. The world rewards the one who recognizes the script and rewrites it. When you see the lie, it loses its spell. When you refuse to play the part assigned to you, you break the stage. Manipulators do not fear your kindness. They fear your clarity. They do not fear your honesty. They fear your silence. They do not fear your forgiveness. They fear your refusal to forget. The lie they feed you is the cage. The truth you claim is the key. Every manipulator is an architect. They may not draw blueprints on paper, but in their mind exists a flawless design. A structure built to cage you without walls, to chain you without shackles. Control is never random, it is engineered. Step 1. Identify the weakness. The first move is reconnaissance. They watch you not for what you show, but for what you hide. Do you crave approval? Fear rejection? Need love, safety, or belonging? Your hunger is the crack in the wall, and they see it before you do. In chess, this is the opening. They study your pawns, your exposed squares, your careless habits. Step 2. Exploit the emotion. Once they find the weakness, they pull it like a lever. If you fear rejection, they withhold affection. If you crave validation, they drip it out in measured drops. They do not push. They press gently until you move yourself. Like a predator circling prey, they know exactly which direction to push you. The storm doesn't arrive all at once. It starts with a breeze that bends you until bending becomes normal. Step 3. Reward compliance. Here the architecture grows stronger. Every time you obey, they give you what you crave. Attention, praise, approval, warmth. The brain learns quickly. Compliance equals comfort. Resistance equals pain. Soon, you no longer need to be forced. You self-correct to avoid losing the reward. This is the same principle that trains animals, but it works even better on humans who crave meaning and connection. Step 4. Punish resistance. And when you do resist, the walls close in. They punish subtly. Silence, withdrawal, disapproval, shame. Sometimes directly. Anger, guilt-tripping, threats. The punishment does not have to be large, it only has to be consistent. Like an electric fence, one shock is enough to keep you from testing the boundary again. The brilliance of this architecture is that it repeats. The cycle identify, exploit, reward, punish becomes a loop. Plays in families, in workplaces, in friendships, in love. The manipulator doesn't need creativity. They only need patience. The victim's perspective is chaos. They feel confusion. Why am I anxious? Why do I want their approval so badly? Why do I fear their silence? To them, the structure is invisible. They stumble inside the maze, believing they are free, unaware that every path leads back to the architect's design. But the manipulator sees with clarity. To them, you are predictable. They know which button to press, which thread to pull, which silence will cut deepest. They don't see a person. They see a system, and systems can be controlled. This is the architecture of control. Not brute force, but precision engineering. A palace with invisible walls. A game where the rules are hidden from you, but clear to them. And here is the unsettling truth. The blueprint is simple, but devastatingly effective. The only way to escape it is not to resist randomly, but to see the design itself. Once you see the structure, the walls dissolve. The architect loses their masterpiece. There is one thing every manipulator dreads. It isn't your anger. It isn't your rebellion. It isn't even your departure. It's recognition. The moment you see the strings, the illusion shatters. Their power does not come from strength, but from your blindness. Like a magician, their trick only works when you don't look at the wrong hand. Awareness is the mirror they fear, because once you hold it up, their mask cracks. When you are unaware, you stumble in the dark. You explain away their silence, whispering to yourself, maybe they're just busy. You rationalize their cruelty with excuses like, they didn't mean it like that. You even defend their punishments, telling yourself, I deserved it. I overreacted. This blindness becomes their kingdom. Every excuse you invent is another brick in the walls of their control. But something shifts when you stop explaining and start observing. You notice the patterns, how they always go silent when you resist, how they suddenly flood you with warmth when they need something, how guilt appears the moment you think about leaving. It is the repetition that betrays them. Recognition is not loud. It is quiet, surgical, almost sacred. A stillness enters your mind when you whisper to yourself, this is not love, this is control. Here is the secret manipulators cannot bear. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Their tools, silence, guilt, flattery, obligation, suddenly look pathetic. You recognize the cycle, and what once felt like thunder now sounds like cheap echoes in an empty room. You stop reacting. Their silence no longer hooks you. Their praise no longer intoxicates you. Their punishments no longer sting. You watch them perform their old tricks, but the spell is broken. To them, this is terror. Because without your blindness, their architecture collapses. The web disintegrates. The palace of invisible walls dissolves into mist. And the irony is cruel. Manipulators believe they are the hunters, yet it is they who live in fear, not of you but of themselves being seen. The mirror reflects their truth. A person so hollow, so desperate for control, that without deception they are powerless. They fear the mirror because it reveals the absurdity of their design. What once looked like mastery now looks like desperation. What once felt like dominance now feels like weakness. And once you awaken, the relationship changes forever. They may rage. They may withdraw. They may double down. But deep down, they know the mask is gone. The greatest weapon against control is not strength, not defiance, not war. It is clarity. The mirror is not made of glass. It is made of awareness. And the moment you hold it up, the master is unmasked, the puppeteer exposed, the spell undone. This is why they fear recognition more than anything. Because once you see the strings, the dance ends. Awareness is not a roar. It is not a weapon drawn in battle. It is a shift in sight. Sudden, piercing, irreversible. The awakening of clarity begins in silence. Before clarity, life feels like a haze. You walk through days heavy with guilt you cannot name, tired from obligations you never agreed to, restless from conflicts you never started. You are consumed by the dull ache of being used without knowing why. It is like stumbling through fog. You sense shapes around you, but nothing is sharp, nothing is defined. You know something is wrong, but you cannot find its source. And this is where most remain trapped, mistaking the fog for normalcy. But then something shifts. A phrase repeats in your head. A silence feels too calculated. A kindness arrives too perfectly timed. You pause not with emotion, but with curiosity. And in that pause, a thread appears. Thin, faint, almost invisible. But it leads somewhere. You follow it. You trace it. And suddenly the fog trembles. Awakening does not arrive as rage. It arrives as vision. The strings appear. The silence is no longer innocent. The guilt is no longer yours. The praise is no longer genuine. You see, clarity cuts sharper than any blade. Once you notice the strings, they glow everywhere. The manipulator's every move becomes predictable. Their sulks, their flattery, their withdrawal, their sudden generosity. The script repeats like a tired play you've already memorized. Awareness transforms your posture. You no longer lean forward, desperate to please. You no longer stumble in the dark, apologizing for shadows. Instead, you stand still. You watch, and your silence becomes heavier than their words. This shift terrifies them. Clarity is not loud rebellion. It does not shout. It does not accuse. It observes. And observation alone dismantles the performance. When you begin to see, you ask questions not to them but to yourself. Why did they grow silent just then? Why do they smile only when they need something? Why does my chest feel heavy after every conversation? Every question is a cut. Every observation is a withdrawal of power. This is the new battlefield. Not action but perception. To see is to win. The contrast is staggering. In blindness, you lived in dull exhaustion. Every day was a maze with no exit. In clarity, life becomes sharp, almost too sharp. You see manipulation as it happens, like slow motion strikes in a fight. You see the patterns not once, but always. And with each recognition, the invisible chains loosen. The dull haze of being used transforms into the sharp edge of awareness. You stop being the puppet. You start becoming the one who holds the mirror. This is the awakening. Not strength you must build, but sight you must allow. Once the eyes open, they do not close again. Awareness is weaponry, and the moment you wield it, the dance of control begins to crumble. Power is never still. It does not sit, it does not sleep. It moves subtle, fluid, invisible, like music, like a tide, like a dance. And every human interaction, no matter how casual, is part of this choreography. When two people speak, they are not only trading words, they are trading power. A pause can weigh heavier than a sentence. A glance can dominate more than an argument. The dance begins in silence. A manipulator knows this. They control rhythm. When to advance, when to retreat, when to smother you with words, and when to drown you with silence. You mistake this for personality when in truth it is strategy. Power is rarely taken with force. It is coaxed, teased, pulled. Look closely and you will see the weapons. Tone, not the content of speech, but the melody behind it. A sigh disguised as disappointment. A raised voice dressed as authority. Timing, the sudden withdrawal of attention. The delayed response that breeds insecurity. Silence, the most dangerous weapon of all. Forcing you to fill the void with apology, justification, surrender. Withdrawal, affection given, then stolen. Approval dangled, then denied. These are not accidents. They are steps in the dance. Imagine two dancers on a stage. One leads, the other follows. If you do not recognize the rhythm, you are dragged along, spun in circles, moved where they will. You are not dancing, you are being danced. But the moment you notice the pattern, everything changes. You realize that every hesitation was a trap, every compliment a hook, every silence a leash. The performance is exposed. There are two ways to engage: passive acceptance or calculated movement. In passive acceptance, you react blindly. You answer when spoken to, you rush to fix silence with words, you stumble to earn approval. You are a follower in someone else's dance. In calculated engagement, you hold still. You match silence with silence. You slow your responses until they fracture under the weight of their own manipulation. You do not resist loudly. You resist by refusing to move unless it serves you. And this is where the balance shifts. The truth is brutal. Every relationship, from boardroom to bedroom, is an exchange of dominance. Who sets the rhythm? Who breaks the silence? Who withdraws first? The manipulator thrives on your blindness to this truth. They want you to believe in innocence, in equality, in harmony. But beneath the surface, the steps never stop. To see it is to join the dance consciously. To master it is to lead without moving at all. Power flows where unseen. It moves in whispers, not in roars. In timing, not in shouting. In absence, not in presence. The manipulator thinks they hold the rhythm. But once you awaken, you see their steps before they move. And when you see, you no longer stumble. You glide. The dance is no longer theirs. It is yours. The greatest manipulator you will ever face is not outside of you. It is within. The part you deny. The hunger you suppress. The shadow you refuse to look at. Manipulators win not because they are stronger, but because you are divided. You cling to the image of yourself as good, pure, harmless. You deny your ambition, your cunning, your darkness. And in that denial, you become predictable. They exploit your naivety, your eagerness to be liked, your fear of rejection, your refusal to ever be cruel. They know you will bend before you dare to break. Your light blinds you. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden side of the psyche, filled with traits we reject. Anger, lust, envy, control, discipline. We bury these instincts because they frighten us. But buried instincts do not vanish. They leak out in hesitation, in guilt, in weakness. The manipulator sees this fracture and slips in. They play the saint against your sinner, the martyr against your hunger, the innocent against your ambition. By refusing your own darkness, you hand them the match to set you ablaze. The solution is not purity. Purity is brittle. The solution is wholeness. When you embrace your shadow, you stop being ashamed of wanting power, of setting boundaries, of walking away, of saying no. You become dangerous, not because you hurt others recklessly, but because you could and choose not to. The naive self is exploitable. The integrated self is untouchable. Picture the contrast. The light naive self smiles too much, forgives too easily, justifies silence, and mistakes flattery for love. This self gets used, discarded, forgotten. The integrated shadow self sees through games, resists flattery, and wields silence as a weapon. This self is respected, even feared, because it refuses to dance unless the music serves it. One is prey, the other predator. Imagine two versions of you in the same room. One desperate for harmony, the other calm with danger. The manipulator leans toward the first, they sense softness. But when their words meet the second, they falter. Nothing is more unsettling than someone who smiles with the knowledge they could destroy you, but doesn't need to. That is power. Not shouting, not violence, but stillness sharpened by the shadow. The path forward is brutal but simple. Name your shadow. Admit your ambition, your hunger, your pride. Call them yours. Stop apologizing. Every apology for existing is a gift of power to others. Learn to sit in silence, in discomfort, without rushing to ease it. Choose deliberately. Power is not in constant action, but in the ability to withhold it until it matters. When you do this, manipulators no longer see prey. They see a mirror. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your shield, your edge, your weapon. And when you embrace it, you become whole. Whole and therefore untouchable. The manipulator cannot exploit what you no longer deny. The strongest people rarely shout. They do not waste energy trying to prove they are powerful. Instead, they move in silence. The manipulator thrives on noise, on reaction, on the visible clash of words and emotions. But when you do not give them that noise, they lose their rhythm. Quiet strength is the art of denying them the theater they crave. Most people confuse rebellion with resistance. They think raising their voice, arguing, or calling out the manipulator in public is power. But this only feeds the game. The manipulator adapts, twists the narrative, and uses the noise against you. True strength is colder. It is restraint. It is watching without moving, listening without reacting, choosing when and how to strike instead of being provoked into chaos. Silence is not weakness. It is a weapon. When you speak less, your words become sharper. Every glance, every pause carries weight. The manipulator cannot read you if you give them nothing to work with. They bait you with guilt, with flattery, with pressure. You return stillness. They grow restless, confused. Their script begins to collapse. Quiet strength is built on 3 pillars: observation, perception, and timing. Observation means you study before you move. You notice the words that never match the actions. You see how they lean closer when they want something, how they withdraw when they fear exposure. Perception means you understand not just what is being said, but what is being hidden. You notice the silences, the sudden shifts, the patterns repeating. Timing is the final weapon. You wait until the exact moment when their mask slips, and then you act. Not loudly, not desperately, but decisively. Imagine 2 scenes. In the first, someone argues back against the manipulator, their voice raised, their face red, their energy drained. The manipulator smiles because this is their stage. They twist the anger, turn bystanders against the victim, and walk away stronger. In the second scene, the manipulator delivers the same performance, but the target sits in silence, watching with calm eyes. No reaction, no fuel. The manipulator grows louder, more desperate, revealing themselves. By the end, it is not you who looks weak, but them. Quiet dominance does not mean passivity. It means invisibility. You become the calm in the storm while others reveal their chaos. You bend perception without being noticed. You control the narrative by refusing to fight on their stage. And when you finally do speak, when you finally do act, the weight is undeniable. The true masters of influence never show their full hand. They control perception not through force, but through presence. They understand that the loudest voice in the room is not the most powerful. The most powerful is the one that can silence a room with a glance. That is quiet strength. And once you learn it, no manipulator can drag you into their game. You will already have won. The storm always looks endless when you are inside of it. The noise, the confusion, the weight of being pulled by invisible strings makes you believe there is no escape. But storms break. They always break. And when they do, you see what was hidden all along. The strings, the puppeteer, the stage they built for you. When you are blind, you move because they pull. You smile because they expect. You forgive because they demand. You believe the lie because it feels safe. This is how control survives, not by chains but by illusions. Yet the moment you see the threads, the spell is broken. What once looked like power is nothing more than a hand trembling with fear that you will finally notice. There is a silence that comes with clarity. It does not roar. It does not scream. It is the silence of realization, the quiet weight of knowing you are no longer moved by their invisible web. The puppet stands still. The master's hand jerks uselessly in the air. The performance collapses. And in that moment, the manipulator is stripped bare, revealed not as a figure of strength but as someone who depended on your blindness. Power is never truly taken by others. It is given away. Every time you obeyed without question, every time you silenced your instincts to keep peace, every time you accepted less than respect, you handed them the strings. But the storm breaks when you stop giving. When you refuse to play the part written for you, when you no longer dance to their rhythm, their stage goes dark. Do not mistake this for confrontation. You do not need to fight in their arena. You do not need to scream louder, push harder, or prove you are stronger. Clarity is not noise. It is control of self. It is walking out of the storm with calm steps while the manipulator is left clutching strings that no longer bind you. The final realization is chilling but liberating. They never had power over you. They only had the power you surrendered. Once you see this, you are untouchable. Once you stand in clarity, you cannot be pulled back into the storm. The game is over, and this is how it ends. Not with an explosion, not with a dramatic battle, but with stillness. The storm breaks, the sky clears, the strings hang loose, the master is powerless. And you, quiet, steady, unshaken, walk forward, carrying with you a strength no manipulator can took.